In the ancient kingdom of Valdoria, where crown jewels hold the power to legitimize rulers and family secrets can topple dynasties, a single blue sapphire ring becomes the center of a scandal that threatens to destroy the royal family forever. When Queen Consort Isabella discovers that the legendary Valdorian heart, a ring passed down through generations of queens, has been secretly altered, she uncovers a web of deception that reaches the highest levels of the palace. But her confrontation with the ring's current keeper, Crown Princess Serena, leads to a shocking revelation that will change the fate of the kingdom and expose truths that some would kill to keep hidden. This is the story of how one ring, one family, and one moment of truth brought an entire monarchy to its knees. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Valdoria Palace as Queen Consort Isabella made her way through the grand corridors toward the royal jewel chamber. Her silk slippers whispered against the polished stone, the only sound breaking the early morning silence that enveloped the ancient fortress. She had risen before dawn, unable to sleep after the disturbing conversation she had overheard the night before between two palace guards. Isabella paused before the heavy oak doors of the jewel chamber, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for the ornate golden key that hung from a chain around her neck. But 23 years, she had worn this key as a symbol of her position as the keeper of Valdoria's most precious treasures. Never before had she felt the weight of its responsibility so heavily. The chamber door creaked open, revealing walls lined with velvet-cushioned display cases containing centuries of royal regalia. Crowns, scepters, necklaces, and rings glittered under the soft light of crystal chandeliers, but Isabella's eyes were drawn immediately to one particular case in the center of the room, the case that held the Valdorian heart. The ring sat on its cushion of midnight blue velvet, its massive sapphire catching the morning light and throwing fragments of blue fire across the chamber walls. The Valdorian heart was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was the symbol of queenly authority in the kingdom, passed from mother to daughter-in-law for over 400 years. Legend held that the ring could only be worn by the true and rightful queen of Valdoria, and that any pretender who dared to place it on their finger would meet a terrible fate. Isabella approached the case slowly, her heart pounding with each step. The previous evening, while walking past the servants' quarters, she had overheard two guards discussing something that had made her blood run cold. They had spoken in hushed tones about Crown Princess Serena visiting the palace jeweler in secret, about measurements being taken, and about work being done on the blue one in the dead of night. Now, as Isabella studied the ring more closely, her worst fears began to materialize. A sapphire, while still magnificent, seemed somehow different from the one she remembered from her own coronation ceremony decades ago. The color was perhaps a shade lighter, the cut subtly altered. The gold band, too, appeared to have been resized, made smaller to fit more delicate fingers than those of the previous queen, Isabella's mother-in-law, Queen Margareta. Isabella's hands shook as she unlocked the display case and carefully lifted the ring from its cushion. The weight felt wrong in her palm, lighter than she remembered. She turned the band over in her fingers, searching for the tiny inscription that had been carved inside the ring centuries ago. Her heart sank as she found it. The ancient Valdorian motto was still there, but the letters appeared freshly engraved, too sharp and clean for something that should have been worn smooth by centuries of wear. The truth hit her like a physical blow. This was not the original Valdorian heart. Someone had created a replica and replaced the ancient ring with a carefully crafted fake. But who would dare commit such an act of treason against the crown? And more importantly, where was the real ring now? Isabella's mind raced through the possibilities. The Valdorian heart was priceless not just for its monetary value, but for its symbolic significance. Without the real ring, the legitimacy of the royal line could be called into question. Wars had been fought over less in Valdoria's turbulent history. She thought of Crown Princess Serena, the young woman who would one day inherit the throne and, with it, the right to wear the Valdorian heart. Serena had always been ambitious, perhaps too ambitious for her own good. She had grown up in the shadow of her stepmother Isabella, always resentful of the fact that Isabella, as queen consort, held custody of the ring that would one day belong to her. Isabella remembered the heated argument she had witnessed just last month between Serena and her father, King Frederick. Serena had demanded early access to the royal jewels for a state dinner, claiming it was her right as heir to the throne. The king had refused, stating that the Valdorian heart could only be worn during official ceremonies and only by the current queen. Serena had stormed out of the room in fury, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. Could Serena have arranged for the ring to be copied and resized? The very thought made Isabella feel sick to her stomach. If true, it would represent not just theft, but a fundamental betrayal of the trust that bound the royal family together. Isabella carefully replaced the fake ring in its case and locked the display once more. She needed to think carefully about her next move. Confronting Serena directly could backfire if she was wrong about her suspicions, but if she was right, then every moment the deception continued made it worse. She decided to conduct her own investigation first. Isabella had allies throughout the palace, servants, guards, and courtiers who had served the royal family for decades and who could be trusted with sensitive matters. She would need to be discreet, but she had to know the truth. Isabella's first stop was the workshop of Master Aldrich, the palace jeweler who had served the royal family for over 30 years. His workshop was located in the lower levels of the palace, accessible through a narrow stone staircase that wound down from the main floors. The workshop smelled of metal polish and burning coal, and the sound of hammers on anvils echoed off the stone walls. Master Aldrich looked up from his workbench as Isabella entered, his weathered face breaking into a respectful smile. He was a small, thin man with silver hair and hands stained permanently black from years of working with metals and gems. His loyalty to the crown was unquestioned, but Isabella knew she would have to be careful in how she approached her questions. "Your Majesty," Aldrich said, bowing low, "what brings you to my humble workshop this morning?" Isabella closed the door behind her and approached the workbench where Aldrich had been polishing a silver candlestick. "Master Aldrich, I need to ask you about some work that may have been done recently on one of the royal pieces." The jeweler's expression became guarded, and Isabella noticed his hands pause in their work. "What sort of work, Your Majesty? I have reason to believe that someone may have commissioned work on the Valdorian heart without my knowledge or authorization." Isabella watched Aldrich's face carefully for any sign of recognition or guilt. The master jeweler's face went pale, and his hands began to tremble slightly. He set down his polishing cloth and looked directly at Isabella for the first time since she had entered the workshop. "Your Majesty," he said in a voice barely above a whisper, "I must ask for your forgiveness. I have done something terrible, but I swear to you it was not by choice." Isabella felt her heart sink as her worst fears were confirmed. "Tell me everything, Master Aldrich. Leave nothing out." Aldrich wrung his hands nervously before beginning his confession. 3 weeks ago, Crown Princess Serena came to my workshop in secret. She brought with her the Valdorian heart and demanded that I resize it to fit her finger. When I protested that such work required your authorization, she became very angry. "What did she say?" Isabella prompted. "She said that as the future queen, the ring rightfully belonged to her, and that she had every right to modify it as she saw fit. She threatened to have me dismissed from my position and banished from the kingdom if I refused her request or spoke of her visit to anyone." Isabella felt a cold fury building in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. "And you agreed to her demands?" "I had little choice, Your Majesty, but I could not bring myself to alter the original ring. Instead, I created an exact replica, using a sapphire of similar size and quality. I gave the replica to the princess and returned the original Valdorian heart to its case, hoping no one would notice the substitution." "But that's not what happened, is it?" Isabella asked, though she already suspected the answer. Aldrich shook his head miserably. "The next night the princess returned. She had discovered that I had given her a copy rather than altering the original. She was furious and demanded the real ring. When I refused, she threatened not just my position, but the safety of my family. My daughter works in the palace kitchens, Your Majesty, and my grandson is a page in training. I could not risk their livelihoods or their safety." "So you gave her the original ring?" "Yes, Your Majesty. I gave her the true Valdorian heart and placed the replica in the display case. I have not slept properly since, knowing what I had done, but I feared what the princess might do if I disobeyed her commands." Isabella placed a comforting hand on the old jeweler's shoulder. "Master Aldrich, you are not the one at fault here. You were placed in an impossible position by someone who abused their authority and threatened your family. I need you to tell me everything you can about what Princess Serena planned to do with the real ring."
Aldrich looked up at her with gratitude and relief evident in his eyes. She said she intended to have the ring resized properly so that she could wear it during her upcoming engagement ceremony. There are rumors that she plans to announce her betrothal to Prince Marcus of Astoria next month during the Harvest Festival. This news hit Isabella like another blow. If Serena planned to wear the Valdorian heart during her engagement ceremony, she would be making a public claim to queenly authority before she had any right to do so. It would be seen as a direct challenge to Isabella's position and could create a constitutional crisis within the kingdom. Isabella thanked Master Aldrich for his honesty and assured him that he would face no punishment for his forced complicity in Serena's scheme. She instructed him to continue his work as normal and to say nothing of their conversation to anyone, including other members of the royal family. As Isabella made her way back through the palace corridors, her mind was already formulating a plan. She needed to recover the original Valdorian heart before Serena could make her public appearance with it. But more importantly, she needed to understand the full scope of Serena's ambitions and what other plans the young princess might have in motion. Isabella's next stop was the chambers of Lady Margaret Ashworth, her oldest and most trusted friend at court. Lady Margaret had served as Isabella's lady-in-waiting since her arrival in Valdoria over 2 decades ago, and she had an unparalleled network of contacts throughout the palace and the kingdom. Lady Margaret's chambers were located in the east wing of the palace, in a suite of rooms that overlooked the royal gardens. Isabella found her friend seated at her writing desk, working on correspondence with various noble houses throughout the kingdom. "Isabella!" Lady Margaret exclaimed as the Queen entered the room. "You look terrible, my dear." "What has happened?" Isabella closed the door firmly behind her and took a seat in the chair across from Lady Margaret's desk. "Margaret, I need your help with a matter of the utmost delicacy and importance." Lady Margaret set down her pen and gave Isabella her full attention.
"Of course. What can I do?"
Isabella told Lady Margaret everything she had discovered about the Valdorian heart and her conversation with Master Aldrich. As she spoke, she watched her friend's expression change from concern to shock to anger. "That little vixen," Lady Margaret muttered when Isabella had finished her story. "I knew she was up to something. I've noticed her behaving strangely over the past few weeks, more secretive than usual, and she's been having private meetings with people she normally wouldn't associate with." "What sort of people?" Isabella asked. "Foreign dignitaries, for one thing. I saw her meeting privately with the Astorian ambassador just last week, and they seemed to be discussing something quite serious. I also noticed her spending time with Lord Blackwood, which struck me as odd since they've never been friendly before." Isabella felt a chill run down her spine at the mention of Lord Blackwood. He was one of the most powerful nobles in the kingdom, but also one of the most ambitious and ruthless. If Serena had allied herself with Lord Blackwood, it could mean her plans extended far beyond simply wearing the Valdorian heart at her engagement ceremony. "Margaret, I need you to use your contacts to find out everything you can about Serena's recent activities. Who has she been meeting with? What has she been discussing? And most importantly, where might she be keeping the real Valdorian heart?" Lady Margaret nodded grimly. "I'll start making inquiries immediately. But Isabella, if Serena is planning what I think she might be planning, we may not have much time to stop her." "What do you mean?" "Think about it, my dear. The Harvest Festival is only 3 weeks away. That's when all the noble families from across the kingdom will be gathered at the palace. If Serena plans to make a public challenge to the established order, that would be the perfect time to do it. She would have maximum visibility and the support of any nobles who might benefit from a change in leadership." Isabella felt the weight of the situation settling on her shoulders. This was no longer simply about a stolen ring. It was about a potential coup attempt that could plunge the kingdom into civil war. "We need to be very careful about how we proceed," Isabella said. "If we move too quickly or too openly, we could trigger the very crisis we're trying to prevent. But if we wait too long, Serena might succeed in her plans." Lady Margaret leaned forward in her chair. "What do you want me to do?" "Start with the servants who work in Serena's chambers. They see everything and hear everything, but they're often invisible to the people they serve. Find out if anyone has seen the ring or overheard conversations about Serena's plans. Also, reach out to your contacts among the minor nobles.
See if anyone has been approached about supporting Serena's cause or if there have been any unusual political discussions at recent social gatherings. And what will you do? Isabella stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the royal gardens. In the distance, she could see the spires of the capital city rising beyond the palace walls. Thousands of people depended on the stability of the monarchy for their livelihoods and their safety. She could not allow Serena's ambitions to put all of that at risk. "I'm going to do something I should have done years ago," Isabella said quietly. "I'm going to have a direct conversation with my stepdaughter about her future and her place in this family. But first, I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." Isabella turned back to Lady Margaret. "I want you to arrange a private meeting with Captain Harrison of the Royal Guard. We may need his support if this situation escalates. But be discreet about it. We can't afford to let word of our suspicions reach the wrong ears." Lady Margaret nodded and began making notes on a piece of paper. "Consider it done. Is there anything else?" "Yes. I want you to send a coded message to my brother in Northland. If the worst-case scenario comes to pass, we may need allies outside the kingdom who can provide support or sanctuary." As Isabella prepared to leave Lady Margaret's chambers, her friend called out to her one more time. "Isabella, be careful. If Serena is willing to steal the Valdorian heart and threaten Master Aldrich's family, there's no telling what else she might be capable of. Don't underestimate her or the people who might be helping her." Isabella nodded soberly. "I won't, but I also won't allow her to destroy everything that this kingdom stands for without a fight." The rest of the day passed in a blur of carefully orchestrated activities. Isabella maintained her normal schedule of meetings and appointments, giving no outward sign of the turmoil that was building within the palace walls. But beneath the surface, she was gathering information and preparing for what might be the most important confrontation of her reign. By evening, Lady Margaret had returned with disturbing news. 3 separate servants had reported seeing Serena with a small velvet pouch that she kept hidden in her private chambers. One of them had caught a glimpse of blue light emanating from the pouch when Serena had briefly opened it, suggesting that the original Valdorian heart was indeed in her possession. Even more troubling were the reports of Serena's political activities. She had been meeting regularly with Lord Blackwood and several other powerful nobles, and there were rumors that she had been in correspondence with foreign powers who might benefit from instability in Valdoria. As Isabella prepared for bed that night, she made her decision. Tomorrow, she would confront Serena directly and demand the return of the Valdorian heart. But she would not go into that confrontation unprepared or without backup. The future of the kingdom might very well depend on how the next few days unfolded. Little did Isabella know that across the palace in her private chambers, Crown Princess Serena was making plans of her own. She sat at her dressing table, carefully examining the true Valdorian heart by candlelight. The ancient sapphire seemed to pulse with its own inner fire, and Serena smiled as she imagined how it would look on her finger during the Harvest Festival ceremony. Soon, she thought to herself, very soon, she would no longer have to wait for her father's death to claim her rightful place as queen. And if Isabella tried to stand in her way, well, there were ways of dealing with obstacles that threatened one's destiny. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of the Valdorian monarchy, and neither woman fully understood the forces they were about to unleash. The morning mist hung heavy over the palace gardens as Crown Princess Serena made her way along the winding stone path toward the ancient oak tree that had stood in the royal grounds for over 3 centuries. She clutched a small velvet pouch against her chest, feeling the weight of the Valdorian heart through the soft fabric. Today was the day she would put the final pieces of her plan into motion. At the base of the great oak, a figure waited in the shadows. Lord Edmund Blackwood emerged as Serena approached, his tall frame cutting an imposing silhouette against the morning light. His dark hair was streaked with silver at the temples, and his sharp green eyes held the calculating intelligence that had made him one of the most feared political minds in the kingdom. "Your Highness," Lord Blackwood said with a bow that was respectful but not subservient, "I trust you have what we discussed?" Serena glanced around nervously before opening the velvet pouch just enough to reveal the brilliant blue sapphire within. "The Valdorian heart is mine, just as we planned. But there may be complications." Lord Blackwood's expression darkened. "What sort of complications?" "I believe Isabella suspects something. Yesterday, one of my maids overheard her making inquiries about unusual activities in the palace. She's been asking questions about jewelers and meeting with her closest advisors in private."
Then we must accelerate our timeline, Lord Blackwood said firmly.
I had hoped to wait until after the Harvest Festival to make our move, but if the Queen Consort is already suspicious, we cannot afford to delay.
Serena felt a flutter of fear in her stomach.
What do you mean? We can't move too quickly, or we'll make mistakes.
Princess, you seem to forget that we are not the only players in this game. Word has reached me that your stepmother has been in contact with Captain Harrison of the Royal Guard. If she's building support among the military, we could find ourselves facing armed resistance to our plans. The news hit Serena like a physical blow. Captain Harrison commanded the loyalty of over 500 Royal Guardsmen, and his support could be crucial in determining the success or failure of any political upheaval. How do you know this? I have my sources throughout the palace, just as Queen Isabella has hers.
The difference is that mine are motivated by gold rather than loyalty, which makes them far more reliable. Lord Blackwood's smile was cold and calculating.
But we must act decisively now, before she can consolidate her position further.
Serena gripped the velvet pouch tighter.
What do you propose? Tonight is the monthly court dinner. Every major noble family will be in attendance, along with foreign dignitaries and trade representatives. It's the perfect opportunity to make a public demonstration of your authority.
You want me to wear the ring at the dinner? Serena's voice rose slightly with anxiety. That would be seen as a direct challenge to Isabella's position.
My father would never forgive such an act of defiance. Lord Blackwood stepped closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Your Highness, with respect, your father is not the man he once was.
His health has been failing, and his grip on power has weakened considerably. The nobles are already beginning to whisper about the succession and what will happen when he is no longer able to rule.
Serena knew this to be true, though she hated to admit it even to herself.
King Frederick had suffered several episodes of weakness and confusion over the past year, and the palace physicians had been increasingly concerned about his condition. There were days when he seemed like his old self, commanding and decisive, but there were other days when he appeared frail and uncertain.
What exactly are you suggesting? She asked.
Tonight you will enter the dining hall wearing the Valdorian heart.
You will announce your engagement to Prince Marcus of Astoria, cementing a crucial political alliance, and you will make it clear to everyone present that you are ready to assume the responsibilities of queenship, with or without your father's formal abdication.
The audacity of the plan took Serena's breath away. It was everything she had dreamed of, but it also represented a point of no return.
Once she made such a public declaration, there would be no going back to the way things had been. And if Isabella tries to stop me, that's where our other preparations come into play. Lord Ashford and Lord Cumberland have agreed to support your claim, along with a dozen other noble families. The Astorian ambassador has assured me that his government will recognize your authority immediately, and I have been in contact with certain elements within the Royal Guard who are sympathetic to the idea of new leadership.
Serena felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders. This was what she had been working toward for years, the chance to claim her rightful place as the true power in Valdoria. But she also knew that the risks were enormous. If their plan failed, she could face charges of treason and be stripped of her title and inheritance. I need guarantees, she said finally. I need to know that you and your allies will stand by me no matter what happens tonight. Lord Blackwood reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document sealed with red wax.
This is a formal declaration of support signed by every noble family that has agreed to back your claim. They have committed not just their political influence, but their financial resources and their personal armies if necessary.
Serena took the document and examined the seals and signatures. The names represented some of the most powerful families in the kingdom, and their combined resources could indeed challenge the authority of the crown. But she also noticed some important absences, families that had remained loyal to her father and stepmother.
What about the Duke of Westmarch
and the Earl of Thornfield? Their support could be crucial.
They have declined to commit themselves at this time, Lord Blackwood admitted. But I believe they will come around once they see that we have the momentum and the backing of Astoria. Nobody wants to be on the losing side of a succession dispute. As they concluded their meeting, neither Serena nor Lord Blackwood noticed the figure concealed behind a cluster of rose bushes 30 yards away.
Lady Margaret Asworth had risen early to walk in the gardens, as was her custom. when she had spotted the clandestine meeting taking place. She had been unable to hear most of their conversation, but she had seen enough to confirm Isabella's worst fears.
Lady Margaret waited until both conspirators had left the area before emerging from her hiding place. Her heart pounded as she hurried back toward the palace. Isabella needed to know about this meeting immediately, and they needed to prepare for whatever Serena was planning to do at tonight's court dinner. Meanwhile, in her private study, Queen Isabella was reviewing reports from her various sources throughout the kingdom. The news was disturbing on multiple fronts. In addition to the political maneuvering within the palace, there were reports of unusual military movements along the borders with neighboring countries. Trade caravans were being delayed or diverted, and several foreign diplomats had made unexpected changes to their travel plans. Isabella suspected that word of the internal strife within the royal family was beginning to leak beyond the palace walls, and that other kingdoms were positioning themselves to take advantage of any instability in Valdoria. This added another layer of urgency to the need to resolve the crisis quickly and decisively. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called out. Lady Margaret burst into the room, her face flushed from running, and her eyes wide with alarm. "Isabella, we have a problem. I've just witnessed a meeting between Serena and Lord Blackwood in the gardens. They were discussing plans for tonight's dinner, and from what I could observe, they're preparing to make some sort of public move." Isabella set down the reports she had been reading and gave Lady Margaret her full attention. "Tell me everything you saw and heard." Lady Margaret recounted her observations, including the exchange of documents and the animated discussion about timing and support. When she finished, Isabella sat in silence for several moments, processing the implications. "So they plan to make their move tonight," Isabella said finally. "We need to be ready for them." "What do you want to do?" Lady Margaret asked. "First, I need to speak with Captain Harrison immediately. If Serena is planning to challenge my authority publicly, I need to know that the Royal Guard will maintain order and support the lawful chain of command." Isabella stood up and walked to a cabinet where she kept her most important correspondence. She withdrew a key and opened a locked drawer, removing a small leather-bound book. "What's that?" Lady Margaret inquired. "Insurance," Isabella replied cryptically. "This book contains detailed records of every financial transaction, political agreement, and secret arrangement that has taken place in this kingdom over the past 20 years. If Lord Blackwood and his allies want to play political games, they should remember that I have been playing this game much longer than they have." Isabella tucked the book into a hidden pocket in her dress and turned back to Lady Margaret. "I also need you to send immediate messages to the Duke of Westmarch and the Earl of Thornfield. Tell them that I request their presence at tonight's dinner, and that their loyalty to the crown may be tested before the evening is over." "Do you think they'll support you over Serena?" "I believe they'll support the stability of the kingdom over personal ambition. Both men have too much to lose from civil war or foreign intervention to risk supporting a coup attempt." As Lady Margaret prepared to carry out her instructions, Isabella made another decision. She would need to speak with King Frederick before the evening's events unfolded. His health might be failing, but he was still the rightful king, and his voice would carry enormous weight in any confrontation with Serena. Isabella made her way through the palace corridors to the royal chambers where King Frederick spent most of his time these days. She found him in his private sitting room, staring out the window at the gardens below. He looked older and more fragile than she remembered, but his eyes were clear and alert. "My dear Isabella," he said as she entered the room, "you look troubled. What brings you to see me this morning?" Isabella took a seat beside her husband and gently took his hand in hers. "Frederick, I need to speak with you about something very serious. It concerns Serena and the future of the kingdom." The king's expression grew grave as Isabella recounted everything she had discovered about the stolen Valdorian heart and the conspiracy building around Serena's ambitions. She was careful to present the facts without editorial comment, allowing Frederick to draw his own conclusions about his daughter's actions. When she finished speaking, Frederick was silent for a long time. Isabella could see the pain and disappointment in his eyes as he processed the betrayal of trust that Serena's actions represented. "I had hoped," he said finally, "that she would grow into her responsibilities naturally. I thought that given time and proper guidance, she would understand the weight of the crown and the sacrifices required of those who wear it. It seems I was wrong. Frederick, tonight at the court dinner, she may try to make a public challenge to the established order. I need to know that you'll support me if that happens."
The king squeezed Isabella's hand and looked directly into her eyes. "You have been a faithful queen and a devoted stepmother, even when that role was difficult and thankless. If Serena has chosen to pursue power through deception and betrayal, then she has forfeited any claim to my support or protection." Isabella felt a wave of relief wash over her. With Frederick's backing, she would be able to confront Serena from a position of strength, but she also knew that the evening's events would be painful for the king, regardless of how they unfolded. "There is one more thing," Frederick said, his voice growing stronger with resolve. "If Serena is determined to claim the throne through force or manipulation, then perhaps it's time to consider alternative arrangements for the succession." Isabella looked at him with surprise. "What do you mean?" "I have a nephew, Prince Alexander, who has been serving as governor of our northern provinces. He has shown wisdom, integrity, and genuine concern for the welfare of our people. Perhaps it's time to consider whether he might be better suited to inherit the crown than Serena." This was a possibility that Isabella had never considered. Changing the line of succession would be a drastic step, but it might be the only way to prevent a civil war and ensure the stability of the kingdom. "Such a change would require the approval of the noble council," Isabella pointed out. "Yes, but if enough of them witness Serena's betrayal tonight, they might be willing to support such a measure, especially if the alternative is a kingdom torn apart by competing claims to the throne." As the day progressed, both sides of the brewing conflict made their final preparations. Serena spent hours with her personal seamstress ensuring that her gown for the evening would properly display the Valdorian heart. She also met with several of her supporters to coordinate their actions during the dinner. Isabella, meanwhile, worked with Captain Harrison to ensure that loyal guardsmen would be positioned strategically throughout the dining hall. She also spent time with the palace staff, making sure that key servants understood the importance of maintaining order and security during the evening's events. As the sun began to set over the palace grounds, the stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just the fate of the royal family, but the future direction of the entire kingdom. Neither side was fully prepared for the explosive revelations and shocking betrayals that the night would bring. In her chambers, Serena stood before her mirror, the Valdorian heart gleaming on her finger as she practiced the speech she would give to announce her engagement and her readiness to assume the throne. She felt a mixture of excitement and terror as she contemplated the magnitude of what she was about to attempt. Across the palace, Isabella made her own final preparations. She had chosen to wear a gown of deep purple, the traditional color of Valdorian royalty, and around her neck she wore a necklace that had belonged to the first queen of the dynasty. She would enter the dining hall not as someone defending her position, but as someone confident in her rightful authority. The clock in the palace tower struck 7, and guests began to arrive for what would become known in Valdorian history as the Night of Sapphires. Neither the conspirators nor their opponents could have predicted the chain of events that would unfold before morning, or the permanent changes that would be wrought upon the ancient kingdom. As the first nobles took their places at the great dining table, the air crackled with tension and anticipation. Everyone present seemed to sense that they were witnessing something momentous, though few understood the true nature of the drama that was about to unfold. The stage was set for revelations that would shake the monarchy to its foundations. The great dining hall of Valdoria Palace had never witnessed such an atmosphere of barely contained tension. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the faces of nearly 100 guests, each representing the most powerful families and foreign dignitaries in the known world. The long mahogany table, which could seat 60 people comfortably, groaned under the weight of golden plates, crystal goblets, and elaborate centerpieces of white roses and blue delphiniums. Queen Isabella entered the hall precisely at 8 o'clock, her purple gown rustling against the marble floor as she made her way to her designated seat at the king's right hand. She had arrived early enough to observe the seating arrangements and note which guests had chosen to position themselves near Serena's usual place at the table. The political alliances were already becoming clear through these subtle positioning choices. King Frederick appeared a few minutes later, moving slowly but with dignity as he took his place at the head of the table. Isabella was relieved to see that he looked alert and focused, his earlier frailty seemingly strengthened by the gravity of the evening's events. He nodded to various guests as he settled into his ornate chair, but his eyes remained fixed on the entrance, waiting for his daughter's arrival. The Astorian delegation was seated near the middle of the table with Ambassador Marcus Thornwick positioned where he could easily observe both the royal family and the major noble houses. Isabella noticed that he seemed unusually tense for a diplomatic dinner, frequently checking his pocket watch and whispering to his aide. This behavior confirmed her suspicions that foreign powers were indeed involved in whatever Serena was planning. Lord Blackwood had positioned himself strategically across from the Astorian ambassador, with Lord Ashford and Lord Cumberland flanking him on either side. The three men appeared to be engaged in casual conversation, but Isabella could see the intensity in their eyes as they periodically glanced toward the entrance. At exactly 8:15, Crown Princess Serena made her entrance. The hall fell silent as she appeared in the doorway, resplendent in a gown of midnight blue silk that complemented her dark hair perfectly. But it was not her beauty that captured everyone's attention. It was the magnificent sapphire ring that blazed on her right hand, catching the light from the chandeliers and throwing blue fire across the walls. Isabella felt her breath catch in her throat as she saw the Valdorian heart displayed so brazenly. Several guests gasped audibly, recognizing the ancient symbol of queenly authority. The ring had not been worn in public for over 5 years, not since the death of King Frederick's first wife, and its appearance on Serena's hand sent shock waves through the assembled crowd. Serena walked slowly down the length of the table, deliberately allowing every guest to see the ring clearly. She maintained a serene smile, but Isabella could see the triumph gleaming in her eyes. This was her moment of victory, the public declaration that she considered herself the true Queen of Valdoria. "Father," Serena said as she reached her seat, her voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. "Stepmother," she nodded to Isabella with barely concealed contempt. "Distinguished guests, I hope you will forgive my lateness, but I was making final preparations for an announcement that I believe will bring great joy to our kingdom." King Frederick's face had gone pale as he stared at the ring on his daughter's hand. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. "Serena, what is the meaning of this display?" "I think the meaning is quite clear, Father," Serena replied, raising her hand so that the Valdorian heart caught the light more brilliantly. "I am no longer content to wait in the shadows while others make decisions about the future of our kingdom. Tonight, I claim my rightful place as your heir and the future Queen of Valdoria." The silence that followed her words was deafening. Isabella could see the shock and confusion on the faces of many guests, while others, clearly Serena's supporters, nodded approvingly. The foreign diplomats looked fascinated by the unfolding drama, no doubt calculating how this development might affect their own country's interests. Isabella knew that this was the moment she had been preparing for all day. She rose slowly from her seat, her voice calm, but carrying the authority of 23 years as queen consort. "Princess Serena," she said, her words echoing through the hall, "the ring you wear belongs to the crown of Valdoria. It is not a piece of personal jewelry to be claimed by individual ambition. I must ask you to return it to its rightful place immediately." Serena's smile grew wider and more dangerous. "Stepmother, I'm afraid you are mistaken. The Valdorian heart belongs to the rightful queen of Valdoria, and I believe that person is standing before you now." A murmur rippled through the assembled guests as the implications of Serena's words became clear. She was not merely claiming the ring, she was claiming the throne itself. Lord Blackwood chose this moment to stand, his tall frame commanding attention. "Your Majesty," he addressed King Frederick while pointedly ignoring Isabella, "if I may speak on behalf of several noble houses present tonight, we believe it is time for Valdoria to embrace new leadership. Crown Princess Serena has demonstrated the vision and strength necessary to guide our kingdom into a new era of prosperity and power." Isabella interrupted before the king could respond. "You speak of new leadership, but what I see is old-fashioned treason dressed up in pretty words. The princess has stolen the most sacred symbol of our monarchy and now seeks to use it to justify a coup against her own father." Stolen?" Serena's voice rose with manufactured outrage. "The Valdorian heart is mine by right of birth. I am the heir to this throne, and I refuse to continue this charade of waiting for permission to claim what already belongs to me." King Frederick finally found his voice, and when he spoke, the weakness that had plagued him in recent months was gone, replaced by the commanding tone that had once made enemies tremble. "Serena, you will remove that ring immediately and return to your seat. We will discuss your behavior in private after our guests have departed." "No, Father." Serena's defiance was now complete and open. "I will not be dismissed like a child anymore. Tonight, our guests will witness the dawn of a new reign in Valdoria. She turned to address the assembled crowd directly. "Noble friends, distinguished diplomats, I stand before you not just as crown princess, but as your future queen. I have the support of Astoria, the backing of our most powerful noble houses, and the blessing of destiny itself." She held up her hand again, the sapphire seeming to pulse with its own inner light. Ambassador Thornwick rose from his seat, clearly having been coached on his role in this drama. "The Kingdom of Astoria recognizes Crown Princess Serena as the legitimate future ruler of Valdoria and pledges our full support to her reign." This declaration sent another shock through the hall. Foreign recognition of Serena's claim added a dangerous new dimension to the crisis. If other kingdoms began to treat Serena as the legitimate ruler, it could force the hand of Valdorian nobles who might otherwise remain loyal to King Frederick. But Isabella had not been idle during these exchanges. She had noticed Captain Harrison and several of his trusted guardsmen taking positions around the perimeter of the hall. Now she played her next card. "Captain Harrison," she called out clearly, "I believe we have witnessed enough treason for one evening. You will arrest Crown Princess Serena and Lord Blackwood for theft of crown property and conspiracy against the throne." The captain stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "Your Majesty, it will be my honor to uphold the law and protect the rightful authority of the crown." But before the captain could take another step, Lord Cumberland stood up with a sneer on his face. "I'm afraid, Captain, that you may find your authority somewhat limited this evening." As if on cue, a dozen men in the livery of various noble houses emerged from behind the tapestries that lined the walls. They were armed and positioned to control access to the main doors of the hall. Isabella realized with growing alarm that Serena's supporters had planned this confrontation far more carefully than she had anticipated. "You see, stepmother," Serena said with cold satisfaction, "we have taken precautions to ensure that tonight's transition of power proceeds smoothly. My supporters are prepared to use whatever force is necessary to secure the future of this kingdom." Captain Harrison looked around the hall, quickly assessing the tactical situation. His own men were outnumbered, and several guests could be caught in the crossfire if violence erupted. Isabella could see the conflict in his eyes as he weighed his duty to the crown against his responsibility to protect innocent lives. But it was King Frederick who provided the next surprise. Despite his recent frailty, he rose from his chair with sudden strength and authority that reminded everyone present why he had ruled Valdoria successfully for over 30 years. "Enough!" his voice boomed through the hall. "I have listened to enough treachery and witnessed enough betrayal for one lifetime. Serena, you have chosen to dishonor yourself, your family, and your kingdom in pursuit of power that you are neither worthy nor ready to wield." He turned to address the assembled guests, his voice carrying the weight of absolute royal authority. "Let it be known to all present that Crown Princess Serena has forfeited any claim to the throne of Valdoria through her acts of treason this night. The succession will pass instead to my nephew, Prince Alexander of Northland, who has proven himself worthy of the crown through years of faithful service to our people." The proclamation hit the hall like a thunderbolt. Even Serena's supporters looked shocked by this unexpected turn of events. Changing the succession was within the king's power, but it was a nuclear option that no one had anticipated. Serena's face went white with fury and disbelief. "You cannot do this. I am your daughter. The throne is mine by right. Rights must be earned and preserved through honor." King Frederick replied coldly. "You have demonstrated tonight that you possess neither the wisdom nor the character necessary to rule this kingdom." Lord Blackwood recovered from his initial shock quickly and stepped forward with renewed determination. "Your Majesty, I'm afraid that ship has already sailed. Princess Serena has been recognized by foreign powers and has the support of enough noble houses to make her claim legitimate regardless of your personal preferences." "Is that a threat, Lord Blackwood?" Isabella asked, her voice deadly quiet. "It is a statement of political reality, Your Majesty. The princess has the strength to take the throne with or without her father's blessing. We had hoped this transition could be peaceful, but if necessary, we are prepared to use other means." Isabella reached into the hidden pocket of her gown and withdrew the leather-bound book she had retrieved from her study earlier. She held it up so that everyone in the hall could see it clearly. "Lord Blackwood, before you commit yourself and your allies to an irreversible course of action, perhaps you should consider
what I hold in my hand." The noble's confident expression faltered slightly as he stared at the book. "What is that?" "This, my lord, contains detailed records of every secret financial arrangement, every underhanded political deal, and every act of corruption that has taken place in this kingdom over the past 20 years. Your name appears quite frequently in these pages, as do the names of several of your allies." Isabella opened the book to a marked page and began to read aloud. "Lord Blackwood, payment of 50,000 gold crowns in exchange for favorable tax treatment of Astorian merchants. Lord Cumberland, acceptance of bribes from border smugglers in exchange for reduced enforcement patrols. Lord Ashford, embezzlement of funds designated for road maintenance in his territories." With each revelation, the faces of Serena's supporters grew paler. These were not just political embarrassments. They were serious crimes that could result in loss of titles, forfeiture of lands, and possible execution. "You're bluffing," Lord Blackwood said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Isabella turned to another page. "Lord Blackwood, conspiracy to manipulate grain prices during the harvest shortfall of 1823, resulting in increased profits for your estates while common people went hungry." The book contained far more damaging information than even Isabella had remembered, meticulously documented with dates, witnesses, and supporting evidence. It was a weapon that could destroy entire families and reshape the political landscape of the kingdom. Serena looked around desperately as she saw her support beginning to crumble. Several of the nobles who had seemed committed to her cause were now exchanging worried glances and stepping back from their previous positions.
"This changes nothing," she said defiantly, though her voice shook slightly.
"I still have foreign support and the backing of enough loyal Valdorians to press my claim." "Actually, Princess," came a new voice from the entrance to the hall, "you may find that your foreign support is not as solid as you believed." Everyone turned to see Prince Alexander of Northland entering the hall, accompanied by a small retinue of his own guards. He was a man in his early 30s with the strong jaw and piercing blue eyes that marked him as a member of the royal bloodline. His presence was commanding without being ostentatious, and several guests nodded approvingly as they recognized him. "Uncle Frederick sent word to me this afternoon about the situation developing here," Prince Alexander explained as he walked toward the royal table. "I rode through the night to arrive in time for what I suspected would be an eventful evening." He turned to face Serena directly. "Cousin, I am sorry that it has come to this, but your actions tonight have left the family with no choice but to act decisively to preserve the stability of the kingdom." Serena's defiance was beginning to crack under the pressure of these multiple reversals. "You have no right. This is my throne. A throne is not a birthright to be claimed through force and deception," Prince Alexander replied calmly. "It is a responsibility to be earned through service and sacrifice. You have shown tonight that you understand neither." Ambassador Thornwick, seeing the tide turning decisively against Serena, began to edge toward one of the side doors. Isabella noticed his movement and nodded to Captain Harrison, who moved to block the diplomat's escape route. "Ambassador," Isabella called out, "I believe Astoria may wish to reconsider its hasty recognition of Princess Serena's claim, particularly in light of the information contained in this book regarding your own role in several questionable trade agreements." The Astorian diplomat's face flushed red as he realized that his own activities had been documented along with those of the Valdorian nobles. The web of corruption and conspiracy was apparently far more extensive than anyone had imagined. The balance of power in the hall had shifted completely. Serena's armed supporters found themselves vastly outnumbered as Prince Alexander's guards joined forces with Captain Harrison's men. The nobles who had backed her claim were now desperately trying to distance themselves from what was clearly becoming a failed coup attempt. But Serena herself was not yet ready to concede defeat. With the desperation of someone who has gambled everything on a single throw of the dice, she made one final desperate move that would seal her fate and change the course of Valdorian history forever. The tension in the Great Hall reached a breaking point as Crown Princess Serena realized that her carefully orchestrated coup was crumbling around her. Her face, which had been pale with shock moments before, now flushed red with desperate fury. The Valdorian heart on her fingers seemed to pulse with an angry blue fire, as if reflecting the rage burning in her heart. "If I cannot rule this kingdom as its rightful queen," Serena declared, her voice rising to carry throughout the hall, "then perhaps it is time for Valdoria to learn what happens when ancient bloodlines are cast aside for political convenience."
Before anyone could react to these ominous words, Serena reached into a hidden fold of her midnight blue gown and withdrew a small crystal vial filled with clear liquid. She held it high above her head, where everyone could see it clearly. "Do any of you know what this is?" she asked with a malicious smile. "This is essence of nightshade, concentrated enough to poison every person in this hall within minutes of being released into the air." Gasps of horror echoed through the assembled crowd as guests began to push back from the table. Several people screamed, and others began moving toward the doors, only to find their way blocked by Serena's remaining armed supporters, who now revealed the true desperation of their position. Queen Isabella felt her blood turn to ice as she realized the full extent of Serena's madness. The young woman was not merely attempting a political coup, she was prepared to commit mass murder to achieve her goals. "Serena, you cannot be serious," King Frederick said, his voice filled with the anguish of a father watching his child destroy herself. "These are innocent people. Many of them came here tonight as your guests, trusting in the hospitality and safety of our house." "Innocent?" Serena laughed bitterly. "These people represent the corrupt system that has denied me my birthright for years. They have supported a usurper queen and turned their backs on the legitimate heir to the throne. If they will not bow to me willingly, then they can join me in death." Prince Alexander stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Cousin, please think about what you are saying. This madness will not restore your claim to the throne. It will only ensure that you are remembered as a monster rather than a queen. Better to be remembered as a monster than forgotten as a failure," Serena snarled. "At least monsters inspire fear and respect, which is more than I have received from any of you." Isabella realized that Serena had moved beyond rational thought into the realm of pure vengeance. The young woman's obsession with power had twisted into something darker and more dangerous. She was no longer fighting for the throne. She was fighting to punish everyone who had denied her what she believed was rightfully hers. But even as fear gripped the assembled guests, Isabella noticed something that gave her hope. Captain Harrison and his men had not retreated despite the threat of poison. Instead, they were moving slowly and carefully around the perimeter of the hall, positioning themselves for what appeared to be a coordinated action. Isabella caught the captain's eye and saw him nod slightly toward one of the great tapestries hanging on the wall behind Serena. She followed his gaze and realized what he was planning. If his men could create a distraction from multiple directions simultaneously, they might be able to overwhelm Serena before she could release the poison. But they would need perfect timing and a compelling reason for Serena to focus her attention away from the vial in her hand. Isabella made a decision that would require her to gamble with the lives of everyone in the hall. "Serena!" Isabella called out, her voice carrying clearly through the terrified murmur of the crowd. "Before you commit this final act of madness, there is something you need to know. Something about your mother and the true circumstances of your birth." The words hit Serena like a physical blow. Her mother, Queen Margareta, had died when Serena was only 5 years old, and the young woman had spent her entire life idealizing the memory of the beautiful queen who had been taken from her too soon. Any mention of her mother was guaranteed to capture Serena's complete attention. "What are you talking about?" Serena demanded, the vial trembling slightly in her raised hand. Isabella glanced quickly at King Frederick, who nodded almost imperceptibly. They had agreed years ago never to reveal this secret, but the current circumstances left them no choice. Your mother, Queen Margareta, was not the saint you have always believed her to be. The truth is that she was having an affair with Lord Ashford's father, and there was considerable doubt about your paternity when you were born. The revelation sent shockwaves through the hall that were even more powerful than Serena's threat of poison. Lord Ashford himself went white as a sheet and began to back away from the table, clearly horrified by the implication that he might be related to the madwoman threatening to kill them all. "You're lying!" Serena screamed, her voice breaking with anguish. "My mother was pure and noble. She would never have betrayed her marriage vows." "I wish it were a lie," Isabella said sadly. "But your father and I have kept the secret all these years to protect your reputation and your claim to the throne. The truth is that we were never certain whether Frederick was actually your biological father." King Frederick's face was etched with pain as he watched his daughter, or the woman he had raised as his daughter, struggle with this devastating revelation. "Serena, even if the blood connection between us is uncertain, you have been my child in every way that matters. That is why your betrayal tonight cuts so deeply."
Serena's world was crumbling around her. Not only had her claim to the throne been rejected, but now she was learning that she might not even be legitimate royalty at all. The Valdorian heart on her finger suddenly felt like a mockery, a symbol of a birthright that might never have been hers to begin with. It was exactly the distraction that Captain Harrison had been waiting for. As Serena staggered under the weight of Isabella's revelation, guards emerged from behind tapestries and moved swiftly from multiple directions. Their timing was perfect. They reached Serena simultaneously, overwhelming her before she could react. The captain himself tackled Serena from behind, driving her to the ground while carefully controlling her arm to prevent the vial from breaking. Two other guards secured her legs while a third pried the poisonous substance from her grasp. Within seconds, the immediate threat to the assembled guests had been neutralized. But Serena was not finished fighting. Even as the guards held her down, she continued to struggle and scream. "This changes nothing. I am still the rightful queen. The Valdorian heart chose me. It belongs on my finger." "Actually, princess," came a new voice from the entrance to the hall, "that ring belongs to the people of Valdoria, and you have proven yourself unworthy of their trust." Everyone turned to see Master Aldrich, the palace jeweler, entering the hall, flanked by two guards. In his hands he carried a velvet-lined box that seemed to glow with an inner blue light. Isabella felt her heart skip a beat as she realized what the old craftsman was carrying. "Master Aldrich, is that?" "Yes, your majesty. This is the true Valdorian heart. The ring that Princess Serena has been wearing is indeed the replica I created, just as I told you yesterday morning." The revelation sent another shock through the assembled crowd. Serena's face went from red with rage to white with disbelief. "That's impossible," she protested. "I made you give me the real ring. You said you had switched them." Master Aldrich shook his head sadly. "Your Highness, when you threatened my family and demanded the original ring, I could not bring myself to hand over such an ancient treasure to someone I suspected might misuse it. Instead, I gave you the replica and told you it was the original." The true Valdorian heart never left its proper place in the royal collection. Isabella almost smiled despite the gravity of the situation. The old jeweler had outwitted Serena completely, protecting the ancient symbol of royal authority even while appearing to capitulate to her demands. "But the ring I've been wearing," Serena said weakly, "it looks identical. Because I am very good at my craft, your highness, but look closely at the two rings side by side, and you will see the differences." Master Aldrich opened the box he carried, revealing the true Valdorian heart resting on its bed of midnight blue velvet. Even from across the hall, guests could see that this sapphire had a depth of color and brilliance that the replica could not match. The ancient gem seemed to pulse with centuries of accumulated power and history. Captain Harrison carefully removed the fake ring from Serena's finger and handed it to Master Aldrich, who placed the two rings side by side for comparison. The differences were subtle but unmistakable to trained eyes. The true Valdorian heart was slightly larger, its color deeper, and its internal faceting more complex. "The replica is beautiful work," Master Aldrich explained, "but it lacks the soul of the original. The true Valdorian heart has been blessed by centuries of righteous queens. It carries the weight of history and the legitimacy of the crown. The copy is merely a pretty bauble." Serena slumped in the arms of her captors, all fight finally drained out of her. She had risked everything: her title, her family, her honor, and ultimately the lives of everyone in the hall, for a piece of costume jewelry. The irony was so bitter that it seemed to break something fundamental inside her. "What will happen to me now?" she asked in a voice barely above a whisper. King Frederick approached his daughter slowly, his face a mask of profound sadness. "Serena, you have committed treason against the crown, theft of royal property, conspiracy with foreign powers, and attempted murder. Under the laws of Valdoria, any of these crimes could be punishable by death." "Father, please," Serena began, but Frederick held up a hand to silence her. "However," he continued, "you are still my daughter regardless of questions about your birth. I cannot bring myself to order your execution, no matter how richly you might deserve it." He turned to address Prince Alexander, who had been watching the proceedings with grim concentration. "Nephew, when you assume the throne, one of your first acts will be to deal with this situation." I hope you will show more mercy than justice might demand. Prince Alexander nodded solemnly. Uncle, I believe that Princess Serena should be stripped of her royal title and exiled from Valdoria. She will be allowed to take enough personal wealth to live comfortably, but she may never return to the kingdom or make any claim to the throne. And what of her supporters? Isabella asked, looking pointedly at Lord Blackwood and the other nobles who had backed Serena's coup attempt. Prince Alexander considered this carefully before responding. Those who drew weapons against the crown or actively participated in tonight's conspiracy will face trial for treason. Those who merely offered political support may retain their titles and lands, but they will be placed under close watch for the remainder of their lives. Lord Blackwood, who had remained silent since the revelation about the fake ring, finally found his voice. Your Highness, I acted only out of concern for the future of the kingdom. I believe that Princess Serena offered strong leadership for challenging times. Lord Blackwood, Prince Alexander replied coldly. You acted out of greed and ambition, nothing more. The fact that you were willing to support an attempt at mass murder proves that your judgment is fatally flawed. You will spend the rest of your life in prison, and your lands will be redistributed to nobles who have proven their loyalty to the crown. As the immediate crisis was resolved and the conspirators were led away under guard, the assembled guests began to process what they had witnessed. The night that had begun as a routine court dinner had become a defining moment in Valdorian history. Ambassador Thornwick approached Prince Alexander cautiously, clearly hoping to salvage what he could of Astoria's relationship with Valdoria. Your Highness, he said with a deep bow, please allow me to express Astoria's regret for our hasty recognition of Princess Serena's claim. We were clearly misinformed about the true nature of the situation. Prince Alexander studied the diplomat with calculating eyes. Ambassador, Astoria's willingness to interfere in Valdorian succession disputes will not be forgotten. However, I am willing to maintain diplomatic relations provided that your government makes certain assurances about respecting our sovereignty in the future. As the evening finally began to wind down, Isabella found herself standing beside the display case, where Master Aldrich had returned the true Valdorian heart to its rightful place. The ancient sapphire seemed to glow with renewed vitality, as if it were relieved to be back where it belonged. Your Majesty, Master Aldrich said softly, I hope you can forgive my deception in this matter. I knew I was taking a great risk in misleading Princess Serena about which ring was which. Isabella smiled at the old craftsman with genuine warmth. Master Aldrich, your wisdom and loyalty may have saved the kingdom tonight. You will be rewarded appropriately for your service. As the last of the guests departed, and the hall began to empty, the royal family was left to contemplate the permanent changes that had been wrought upon their dynasty. King Frederick looked older and more tired than ever, but there was also a sense of resolution in his bearing. Isabella, he said quietly, I want you to know that I am grateful for everything you did tonight. Without your strength and wisdom, we might have lost everything. Isabella took her husband's hand and squeezed it gently. Frederick, we are family. We protect each other, no matter what the cost. Prince Alexander approached them as they prepared to leave the hall. Uncle, Aunt Isabella, I want you both to know that when I am crowned, there will always be a place for you at court. Your experience and judgment will be invaluable as we work to heal the divisions that tonight's events have created. As they walked together through the corridors of the ancient palace, none of them could have imagined the final twist that fate had in store for their family. The consequences of the Night of Sapphires would extend far beyond the punishment of conspirators and the change in succession. Hidden forces were already in motion that would test the new king's resolve and the kingdom's stability in ways none of them could anticipate. The Sapphire conspiracy had been exposed and defeated, but the true test of Valdoria's resilience was yet to come. 3 months had passed since the Night of Sapphires, and the kingdom of Valdoria was still adjusting to the dramatic changes that had transformed the royal family. King Frederick had formally abdicated 2 weeks after the failed coup, stating that his health no longer permitted him to bear the full weight of the crown. Prince Alexander had been coronated as King Alexander III in a ceremony that was both magnificent and somber, marked by the absence of the woman who should have been his primary supporter, his predecessor's daughter. Queen Isabella had chosen to retain her title and position as Queen Mother, serving as advisor to the new king while gradually transitioning royal responsibilities to Alexander's eventual queen. The arrangement worked well, as Alexander valued her experience and wisdom, while she appreciated having someone younger and more energetic to handle the day-to-day demands of ruling the kingdom. The true Valdorian heart had been displayed prominently during Alexander's coronation, its ancient sapphire catching the light as he swore his oath to protect and serve the people of Valdoria. The ring would remain in the royal collection until Alexander chose a bride worthy of wearing it, but for now it served as a symbol of the restored legitimacy of the crown. The trials of the conspirators had concluded just 1 week before, and the results had sent shock waves throughout the kingdom and beyond. Lord Blackwood had been sentenced to life imprisonment, his vast estates confiscated and redistributed among nobles who had remained loyal during the crisis. Lord Cumberland and Lord Ashford had received similar sentences, though their punishments were slightly less severe due to their more limited roles in the conspiracy. Ambassador Thornwick had been expelled from Valdoria and declared persona non grata. His diplomatic career effectively ended. The Kingdom of Astoria had been forced to pay substantial reparations and sign a treaty guaranteeing non-interference in Valdorian affairs for the next 50 years. But it was the fate of former Crown Princess Serena that had captured the most attention both within Valdoria and in foreign courts throughout the known world. As King Alexander had promised, she had been stripped of her royal title and exiled from the kingdom. But the circumstances of her departure had been far more dramatic than anyone had anticipated. On the morning she was scheduled to leave Valdoria forever, Serena had been found dead in her cell in the palace tower. The official cause of death was listed as suicide by poison, though the type of poison used remained a carefully guarded state secret. What was known was that she had somehow obtained access to the same nightshade essence she had threatened to use during the court dinner, suggesting that her final act was both a confession and a defiant gesture of control over her own destiny. Isabella stood at her window overlooking the palace gardens, watching as gardeners tended to the beds of roses and delphiniums that had been Queen Margareta's favorite flowers. The irony was not lost on her that Serena had died believing herself to be the illegitimate daughter of an unfaithful queen, when in reality the paternity questions had been nothing more than court gossip without foundation. The revelation Isabella had used to distract Serena during the crucial moment of the confrontation had been a complete fabrication, created in desperation to save the lives of everyone in the dining hall. Queen Margareta had indeed been a faithful and devoted wife, and King Frederick was unquestionably Serena's biological father. But Isabella had never revealed this truth to anyone, allowing the lie to stand as part of the official record rather than tarnish Serena's memory further. A soft knock at the door interrupted Isabella's melancholy thoughts. "Enter," she called out. Lady Margaret Ashworth entered the room, carrying a silver tray with tea service for two. Despite all the upheavals of recent months, some traditions remained constant, and their afternoon tea had become a sacred ritual for both women. "Any word from the border provinces?" Isabella asked as Lady Margaret poured the tea into delicate porcelain cups. Prince Regent Marcus reports that the situation remains stable. The redistribution of the confiscated estates has proceeded without major incident, though there are still some grumblings from nobles who feel they should have received larger portions. Isabella accepted her cup with a small smile. There are always grumblings from nobles who feel they deserve more than they receive. That is the natural order of court politics. Lady Margaret settled into her customary chair and regarded her friend with a searching look. "Isabella, how are you really handling everything that has happened? You've been so focused on supporting Alexander and maintaining stability that I worry you haven't had time to process your own feelings about Serena's death." Isabella sipped her tea slowly before responding. "Margaret, I have spent many sleepless nights thinking about whether we could have handled things differently. Whether there was some way to save Serena from herself without endangering everyone else. You cannot blame yourself for her choices, my dear. Serena's obsession with power and her willingness to commit murder to achieve it were not things you could have prevented or cured. Perhaps not, but I sometimes wonder if the lie I told about her paternity pushed her over the edge. She died believing herself to be illegitimate, when the truth was that she was Frederick's daughter in every sense." Lady Margaret set down her teacup with a gentle clink against the saucer. "Isabella, you made that lie in desperation to save the lives of over 100 people. If you had not created that distraction, Serena would have killed everyone in that hall.
including herself. At least this way, most people live to see another day. I know you're right intellectually, but emotionally, it's more complicated. Serena was my stepdaughter for over 20 years. I watched her grow from a sullen child into a beautiful but troubled young woman. I always hoped that one day we might have a real relationship, but instead I ended up being the instrument of her downfall. Before Lady Margaret could respond, another knock interrupted their conversation. This time it was King Alexander himself who entered the room, his expression serious but not alarmed. "Aunt Isabella, Lady Margaret, I hope I'm not intruding, but I have some news that I thought you should hear immediately." Isabella gestured for him to take a seat. "Of course, Alexander. What has happened?" "We have received word from our agents in the Eastern Kingdoms that former Princess Serena may not have been acting entirely on her own initiative during the conspiracy." Both women looked at him with surprise and concern.
What do you mean? Isabella asked.
Alexander withdrew a sealed document from his jacket and placed it on the table between them. "This is a letter that was discovered hidden in Serena's chambers after her death. It appears to be correspondence with someone using the code name the Cardinal, who was providing her with detailed intelligence about our government's activities and strategic planning." Isabella felt a chill run down her spine. "Someone was feeding information to Serena from within our own court?" "It appears so. The letter references private conversations between you and me, Aunt Isabella, as well as details about military deployments that only someone with high-level access could have known. Whoever the Cardinal is, they had access to our most sensitive secrets." Lady Margaret leaned forward with alarm. "Alexander, if there's still a traitor in the court, we could be facing another conspiracy. Serena may have been just the visible tip of a much larger plot." "That's exactly what I'm afraid of," Alexander replied grimly. "The letter suggests that Serena's coup attempt was intended as the first phase of a larger plan to destabilize Valdoria and make it vulnerable to foreign conquest." Isabella's mind raced through the implications. The Astorian involvement wasn't just opportunistic. They were part of a coordinated strategy to weaken our kingdom. Possibly, though we don't yet know how extensive the network might be or who else might be involved. Alexander stood up and began pacing the room. "I've ordered a complete review of everyone with access to sensitive information, but the investigation will need to be conducted carefully to avoid creating panic or suspicion among loyal courtiers." "What can we do to help?" Isabella asked. "Actually, I was hoping you might be willing to take on a special assignment. Your experience and your network of contacts throughout the court make you uniquely qualified to identify potential suspects." Isabella nodded without hesitation. "Of course. What do you need me to do?" Alexander handed her a second document. "This is a list of everyone who had access to the information referenced in Serena's letter. I need you to investigate their backgrounds, their financial situations, and their recent activities. Look for anything that seems unusual or suspicious." As Isabella reviewed the list, her heart sank. It included many names of people she had trusted implicitly, servants who had worked in the palace for decades, nobles whose families had served the crown for generations, and court officials who had sworn sacred oaths of loyalty. "Alexander, some of these people have been like family to me. The thought that one of them might be a traitor is almost unbearable. I understand, Aunt Isabella. But we cannot allow sentiment to blind us to the possibility of betrayal. The security of the kingdom may depend on uncovering the truth, no matter how painful it might be." Over the following weeks, Isabella threw herself into the investigation with the same determination she had shown during the Sapphire conspiracy. She interviewed servants, reviewed financial records, and observed the behavior of everyone on Alexander's list. The work was emotionally exhausting, as she was forced to view longtime friends and allies through the lens of suspicion. Her breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Master Aldrich, the palace jeweler who had played such a crucial role in exposing Serena's deception, approached Isabella with information that would crack the case wide open. "Your Majesty," he said during a private meeting in his workshop, "I have been thinking about something that happened several months before Princess Serena approached me about the ring." "What sort of something?" Isabella asked. "A man came to my workshop claiming to be conducting an inventory of palace treasures for insurance purposes. He asked very detailed questions about the Valdorian heart, its weight, its dimensions, the specific characteristics that would distinguish it from a replica." Isabella felt her pulse quicken. Did you recognize this man? At the time, I assumed he was a court official I hadn't met before. But thinking back on it now, I realized that his questions were far too specific for a routine insurance inventory. He seemed to already know a great deal about the ring's history and significance. Can you describe him? Master Aldrich nodded. He was a man of middle years, well-dressed, but not ostentatiously so. He had graying hair and wore spectacles. Most notably, he had a distinctive scar on his left hand. It looked like an old burn mark. Isabella's blood ran cold as she recognized the description. There was only one person in the palace who matched those characteristics exactly: Master Willem van Houten, the court historian who had served the royal family for over 15 years. Master van Houten was responsible for maintaining the official records of the kingdom, including genealogical charts, succession documents, and historical precedents. His position gave him access to virtually every secret in the royal archives, and his expertise would have made him invaluable to anyone planning a coup. Isabella thanked Master Aldrich and immediately set about gathering more evidence against Van Houten. What she discovered made the scope of the conspiracy even more chilling than she had imagined. The historian had been systematically copying sensitive documents and passing information to foreign agents for at least 3 years. More disturbing still, Isabella found evidence that Van Houten had been manipulating historical records to support Serena's claim to the throne while casting doubt on the legitimacy of other potential heirs. His expertise in royal genealogy had made him the perfect person to craft legal justifications for a coup attempt. When Isabella confronted Van Houten with the evidence, the mild-mannered historian dropped his facade of loyal service and revealed himself to be a cold and calculating traitor. "You have no idea of the forces you're dealing with, Your Majesty," he said with a sneer that transformed his previously benign features. Princess Serena was just one piece in a much larger game. Her failure has been noted, but it does not end our plans for Valdoria. "Who are you working for?" Isabella demanded. "Let's just say that there are kingdoms that would benefit greatly from Valdoria's weakness and fragmentation. Your little kingdom sits at the crossroads of 3 major trade routes, and your mineral wealth has not gone unnoticed by your neighbors." Isabella realized that the Sapphire Conspiracy had been just the beginning of a much larger threat to Valdorian independence. Foreign powers were actively working to destabilize the kingdom and make it vulnerable to conquest or partition. The arrest of Master Van Houten led to the discovery of an entire network of spies and saboteurs operating within Valdoria. Some were foreign agents who had infiltrated the kingdom over a period of years, while others were Valdorian citizens who had been bought or blackmailed into betraying their homeland. King Alexander responded to these revelations with swift and decisive action. The spy network was rolled up systematically, with arrests and trials proceeding according to due process but with maximum security precautions. Several foreign diplomats were expelled, and trade relationships with neighboring kingdoms were reassessed based on their potential involvement in the conspiracy. The most shocking discovery came when investigators found evidence that the conspiracy extended beyond Valdoria's borders, into a coordinated effort involving at least 3 foreign kingdoms. The goal had been to create a succession crisis that would lead to civil war, allowing the conspirators to install a puppet ruler who would serve their interests. As the full scope of the plot became clear, Isabella found herself grateful for the wisdom of the ancient Valdorian monarchs who had created the tradition of the Valdorian heart. The ring had served not just as a symbol of legitimate authority, but as a protection against usurpers and pretenders. Serena's inability to possess the true ring had been a crucial factor in exposing her illegitimate claim. 6 months after the Night of Sapphires, King Alexander held a ceremony to formally close the investigation and honor those who had helped protect the kingdom. Isabella was awarded the Order of the Golden Crown, Valdoria's highest civilian honor, for her role in exposing both conspiracies. As she stood in the great hall where so much drama had unfolded, Isabella reflected on the lessons learned from the crisis. Power corrupts when it becomes an end in itself rather than a means of service to others. Trust must be earned and constantly renewed, even among family members. And vigilance against those who would exploit weakness or exploit division is the eternal price of maintaining freedom and security. The true Valdorian heart remained in its place of honor in the royal collection, its ancient sapphire seeming to glow with approval as Isabella looked upon it one final time during the ceremony.
The ring had served its purpose, protecting the kingdom from those who would claim authority through deception and force. King Alexander had proven himself worthy of the crown through his handling of the crisis, showing both mercy and justice in appropriate measure. His reign would be remembered not just for its dramatic beginning, but for the wisdom and strength he had shown in protecting Valdoria's independence and integrity. As the ceremony concluded, and guests began to depart, Isabella felt a sense of closure about the events that had transformed her family and her kingdom. The Sapphire conspiracy was finally over, its participants either punished or reformed, and Valdoria was stronger and more secure than ever before. The ancient kingdom would face new challenges in the years to come, but it would face them with a ruler who had been tested by fire and found worthy, protected by institutions and traditions that had proven their worth over centuries, and guided by the wisdom earned through surviving one of the most dangerous threats in its long history. The Sapphire had returned to its rightful place, and all was well in the kingdom of Valdoria.